killer whale at Florida's SeaWorld attacked and killed its trainer.
They devoted their lives to these creatures, trained with them, trusted them. But in the end, trust wasn't enough. 7 orca trainers came face to face with something no one expected. Some walked away shaken. Others didn't walk away at all. What went wrong inside the tank? What warning signs were missed? You'll want to hear every second, because the truth behind these stories may flip everything you thought you knew.
SeaWorld is keeping a close eye on a killer whale blamed for killing a trainer.
Number 7. Dawn Broncho, SeaWorld Orlando, 2010. The crowd had no idea what they were about to witness. It was supposed to be another thrilling show at SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida. Families sat around the massive tank, waiting to be entertained. At the center of it all was Dawn Broncho, a seasoned trainer who had become a star attraction in her own right. But what happened that day would leave everyone stunned and also mark a turning point for marine parks around the world. Dawn was 40 years old. She had dedicated her life to understanding animals. With a background in psychology and animal behavior, she started her career working with dolphins in New Jersey. It did not take long before she landed a position at SeaWorld, and here, her passion for marine life quickly stood out. Within just 2 years, she advanced to working with killer whales. Dawn eventually became the face people connected with SeaWorld. Her image showed up everywhere, from TV ads to brochures to highway billboards. She played a big part in updating the famous Shamu show and was often spotted doing jaw-dropping tricks alongside the park's giant orcas. One of those was Tilikum, a massive male weighing 12,000 pounds, who had lived most of his life behind concrete walls. Nicknamed Blackfish by some, his past was filled with disturbing incidents. But with Dawn, there appeared to be a quiet understanding, or so everyone thought. Trainers described the connection between Dawn and Tilikum as something built on mutual trust and care.
Tilikum is actually really with Dawn in the beginning of the video.
But on February 24, 2010, that relationship came to a horrifying end. The show had just finished. The energy in the arena was still high. Dawn remained by the water's edge, lying down with her face next to Tilikum's. Moments later, everything changed. Without warning, the orca pulled her into the water. At first, many believed her long ponytail had been the cause, but some reports claimed Tilikum had grabbed her by the shoulder. What followed wasn't a quick or accidental event. It was a sustained and brutal attack. Dawn was tossed and thrashed around in the tank. She drowned, but that wasn't the only cause of death. Her injuries were devastating. Her left arm had been torn off. Her scalp was ripped from her head, and her hair and skin were found at the bottom of the pool. Bones were crushed. Her jaw was broken, and her ribs and vertebrae had snapped. The whale held onto her body for 45 minutes. Trainers tried everything. They tossed nets, threw food, and used every method they knew, but Tilikum would not let her go. Eventually, the team managed to guide him into a smaller pool where he finally released her body. By then, it was too late. The official cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and torso, along with drowning. After the tragedy, SeaWorld made changes. Trainers were no longer allowed to get in the water with orcas. 6 years later, they officially ended their orca breeding program. As for Tilikum, he spent his final years mostly out of public view and died in January 2017. The shockwaves of what happened that day did not fade quickly. It raised questions that had been avoided for years. Are these animals meant to live in tanks, away from the ocean, performing for crowds? Number 6. Alexis Martinez, Loro Parque, Spain, 2009. It was supposed to be routine, another rehearsal, another day at the park, but the pool at Loro Parque in Tenerife would not stay calm for long. Alexis Martinez had been around orcas for years. He was 29, experienced, and understood what it meant to earn the trust of a killer whale. Quito, the orca he worked with that day, wasn't new to him. They had trained together often. Quito was one of the main attractions. Tourists came to see his power and precision. Trainers relied on his cooperation. But that Christmas Eve would mark a sudden, terrifying shift. They were working on the holiday show. The setting was a training pool. Alexis was in the water. Quito looked calm. Trainers nearby said the whale seemed to be in a good mood. Another staff member was stationed on the stage. Others stood close, observing. As part of the routine, Alexis attempted a move called a stand-on spy hop. It required him to balance on Quito as the orca rose from the water. Things went off track. Quito leaned, and Alexis lost his balance. He tumbled off. After the fall, the pair floated side by side for a moment. Quito didn't follow through on the next set of stunts. Something felt off. Then came a more direct sign. Quito shifted, placing himself between Alexis and the platform. Trainers watched as he moved with intent. He pushed Alexis downward. The motion wasn't playful. Using his snout, Quito drove the trainer to the bottom of the pool. It was deliberate. The other trainer on the platform saw it happen. Realizing the danger, he began giving signals, hoping to break through to Quito, but it didn't work. Quito rose to breathe. There was a pause, a moment of hope. Maybe he would swim away, maybe it was over, but it wasn't. Quito dove again. This time, when he surfaced, the sight shocked everyone watching. Alexis was on the tip of the whale's snout. Quito's mouth was shut. Seconds later, the orca let go. Alexis drifted to the bottom. Panic took over. Trainers scrambled to draw Quito into another section of the pool. He resisted. He played with the gate. He delayed. Only when they dropped a net into the water did he move to the other tank. Alexis' body could then be reached. The injuries were devastating. Internal bleeding, broken bones, deep tissue damage. Nothing could be done. He was pronounced dead. The park tried to explain the incident as an accident. They said there were no signs of violence, but the autopsy painted a different picture. Compression fractures, organ tears, bite marks. The injuries told their own story. People began asking questions about Quito and the other whales. What was life like in that tank? Experts pointed to a disturbing reality. Without a matriarch, which is how wild orcas organize themselves, the social dynamic was fractured. Stress ran high. There was no real structure. They competed, pushed, and lashed out. Every day was the same. No space, no variety, just walls and water. Some said boredom had taken hold. Others pointed to confusion and power struggles. Either way, the conditions shaped how the whales behaved. And in the case of Quito, something inside him gave way that day, and Alexis Martinez paid with his life. Number 5. John Silic, SeaWorld San Diego, 1987.
John Silic is the guy who in 1987 was crushed between two whales.
The crowd was cheering, the pool calm, the lights steady, but beneath the surface, something unexpected was about to unfold. It was November 21st, 1987. At SeaWorld San Diego, trainers and orcas were performing another choreographed show, the kind families lined up to see on weekends. 26-year-old John Silic had worked with these animals for 2 years. He had performed these routines before. That day, he climbed onto the back of a female orca, ready to complete another practice stunt. The moment felt routine. The audience had no idea what was coming. As Silic rode across the water, a male orca named Orky II, weighing around 5 tons, launched into the air. What happened next wasn't part of any plan. Orky crashed directly onto the female carrying Silic. In an instant, all three were underwater. The collision was powerful, enough to knock Silic off and send him plunging hard beneath the surface. The pool, for a few seconds, seemed silent. Trainers rushed forward. The show came to a halt. Silic had been seriously hurt. The damage to his body was extensive. His back, hips, and pelvis were shattered. His ribs and legs had multiple fractures. The surgeons who treated him had to perform 6 separate operations. More than 1 kilogram of metal was inserted into his body to hold everything together. A plate was placed in his pelvis. His thoracic vertebrae were fused. These injuries would limit his movement permanently. Silic spent weeks in recovery. At the University of California, San Diego Medical Center, he began a slow and difficult healing process. Doctors reported him in stable condition, and eventually, he began physical therapy. In a later interview, he explained, "I'm learning to walk again." After the incident, SeaWorld moved quickly. They changed safety protocols. Trainers were told to stop riding whales. They were no longer allowed in the water during performances. Public concern was growing. The changes weren't limited to show routines. Internally, SeaWorld made decisions behind closed doors. The president of the park was removed, along with 3 other employees. Questions were being asked, not just about the whales, but about how the park operated and what trainers were told about the risks they faced. Silic filed a lawsuit. He claimed SeaWorld never properly warned him of the dangers that came with working alongside orcas in the way they were being used. The legal battle did not last long in public view. It was settled out of court. Silic, now bound by a gag order, was not allowed to speak about what had happened behind the scenes. Thousands of pages of internal documents and case details were sealed. SeaWorld later gave its explanation to the public. A spokesperson said the incident was the result of bad timing and insisted it was not aggression from the orca.
We weren't told much about it, other than it was trainer error. It was John's fault, John's fault. He was supposed to get off that whale.
But that explanation didn't satisfy everyone. People continued to wonder, was it truly just a miscalculation? Or had something been building inside the animals forced to perform in controlled pools day after day? Number 4, Ken Peters, dragged deep by Kasatka. The date was November 29, 2006. SeaWorld San Diego's Shamu Stadium was nearly full that evening. Trainer Ken Peters entered the tank with Kasatka, a 5,000-pound orca who had lived in captivity for years. She wasn't new to these performances, and neither was he. The finale was supposed to be smooth. Kasatka would rise from the water with force, launching Peters high so he could dive off her nose. That was the plan. But in a moment that no one expected, the routine fell apart. Instead of lifting him, Kasatka caught Peters by the foot and pulled him under. The audience, still watching, could do nothing but stare. What looked like a mistake quickly became something far worse. Peters was dragged to the bottom of the tank with no way to fight back. It was silent beneath the surface, but onlookers could only imagine what was happening as seconds stretched into minutes. They resurfaced. For a moment, it looked like it might be over. Peters tried to soothe her. He rubbed her back and moved slowly, as he had been trained to do. But Kasatka wasn't finished. In a flash, she gripped him again and plunged down. This continued again and again for nearly 9 minutes. Each time they came up, Peters gasped for air. Each time he was dragged back down. Those watching were frozen. Trainers moved fast, unrolling a net to block Kasatka from following him if he could escape. Finally, she loosened her hold long enough for Peters to swim away. The net held. Peters reached safety, but not without injury. His foot was broken, and he was left with deep puncture wounds. Later analysis pointed to a detail that had gone unnoticed during the show. Kasatka's calf had been calling out from a nearby tank as the performance began. Experts believed that sound, that emotional connection, may have triggered her stress, and stress in a confined space like that can grow fast. Even more unsettling is the fact that this wasn't the first time Kasatka had done something like this. She had targeted Peters before, once in 1993, again in 1999. Each time the warnings were there, and each time they were pushed aside. After the attack, Peters kept calm. He later said he never thought Kasatka meant to kill him, not even at the bottom of the tank, not even when the minutes dragged on. But others didn't share that view. They looked at the conditions, at the training schedules, at the lack of space. Some said if you pull a wild orca from the ocean, confine it for years, strip it of everything familiar, and force it to entertain, what happened that night becomes less surprising. Kasatka remained in captivity for over a decade after the incident. In 2017, she was euthanized after developing incurable pneumonia. But the questions about her time in captivity and what pushed her to that moment never really went away. Number 3. Jonathan Smith and Kandu. From the very beginning, Kandu never seemed to adjust to her captive surroundings. She was a female orca who had been performing at the San Diego park for over 9 years. Her movements weren't always smooth, and those who worked with her had noticed moments of resistance. On March 4, 1987, whatever had been brewing inside her reached a breaking point. That day, Kandu was performing alongside another female orca named Kanau, who was 10 years old. The show had already begun, and 21-year-old trainer Jonathan Smith was riding on Kandu's back, part of a routine that had been practiced many times. But without warning, she turned. Kandu clamped her teeth around him and pulled him down, fast and hard. The water swallowed them. She dragged him to the bottom of the tank. Blood rose to the surface in trails as she brought him back up, only to spit him out again. The crowd gasped, stunned, watching something they never expected to see. Jonathan, injured but conscious, tried to calm everyone by waving. It looked almost surreal. There was no way for the people in the seats to know how bad it was. But the attack wasn't over. As trainers rushed to the side of the tank to try and distract the whales, another orca surged forward. It slammed into Smith, pushing him below the water a second time. The force of that impact was strong enough to knock the wind out of him. Underwater, visibility was low, and all he could do was react. The whales hit him again, and again. He was pulled to the bottom of the 32-foot pool repeatedly, his body struggling to keep up. The entire encounter lasted nearly 2.5 minutes. Smith survived, but the damage was serious. His injuries included a ruptured kidney and a 6-inch laceration to his liver. His upper body was covered in bite marks and scrapes. Recovery was slow. It took time to even stand properly again. The physical pain was only part of what he would carry with him. A year later, he filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld. He claimed he had never been properly informed of the risks. According to him, officials made it seem safe, despite knowing the whale's behavior wasn't always predictable. He had no formal training, and yet he was placed directly into the show routines. His lawsuit, which included accusations of fraud, emotional distress, and battery, was eventually settled privately. A gag order was part of the agreement. That meant no public statements, no records released, no questions answered. But the incident with Jonathan Smith wasn't isolated. Just 3 months after that attack, Candu was involved in another violent encounter. This time, the victim was a female trainer. The outcome was another severe injury, a broken neck. That second attack would add to growing concerns about the risks involved in keeping orcas in tanks. Number 2. Steve Eibel, the whale that changed everything. The audience came for a show, but what they witnessed that day would stick with them for years to come. It happened in July 2004, during an afternoon performance at SeaWorld in San Antonio. The trainer was Steve Eibel, an experienced handler who had worked closely with the park's killer whales. He stepped into the pool expecting another routine interaction, but the young orca named Kai had something else in mind. As thousands of visitors watched from the stands, something shifted in the water. Kai didn't follow the commands like he usually did. Instead, he charged straight at Eibel, using the full force of his body to slam into him. Each hit pushed the trainer beneath the surface, and just when he managed to catch a breath, Kai would strike again. The crowd, once clapping and cheering, now fell silent. The tension in the air was heavy, broken only by the gasps of onlookers as the orca lunged over and over. Several people would later say that Kai looked like he was trying to bite Eibel. Staff members stood by the edge of the pool, frozen. There was nothing they could do. It all happened too fast and too dangerously for anyone to jump in and help. The attack lasted several minutes. Every time it seemed like Kai would stop, he would dive again, driving Eibel back under. Finally, a moment opened up. Kai paused just long enough for Eibel to pull off a desperate move. The whale was blocking the only exit point, the ramp, but Eibel made a split-second decision. He pushed himself onto the orca's back, launched his body over him, and another trainer reached out to pull him to safety. Kai, clearly agitated, turned and slammed his body down on the ramp, as if frustrated the trainer had escaped. Somehow Steve Eibel wasn't injured, not physically at least. In interviews later, he said he didn't know what caused the sudden change in Kai's behavior. The whale was nearing breeding age, which can cause unpredictable actions. That might have been a factor. But Eibel said the most important thing he did was remain calm. He believes that staying composed may have made the difference between life and death. But what really caused that kind of violence? Could it be traced back to something deeper than hormones? That brings us to the larger question. Should wild animals like orcas be held in captivity at all? Orcas are one of the most intelligent and emotionally complex creatures in the ocean. In the wild, they swim up to 100 miles in a single day. They live in close family groups, communicate using unique sounds, and form strong lifelong bonds. When they are placed in tanks, that entire natural structure is taken away. Instead of the open ocean, they are left circling in tight pools. Their social connections are disrupted, their diets are controlled, and their instincts are suppressed. Many orcas in captivity show signs of distress. Some chew on metal bars, others float motionless for hours, and sometimes they lash out. Attacks like the one involving Kai are not random. They are warning signs. Stress, boredom, and frustration build up in ways that are impossible to ignore. These animals are not machines. They feel. And when those feelings reach a breaking point, people get hurt. Kai's attack on Eibel wasn't just a moment of confusion. It was part of a much larger pattern seen in marine parks around the world. A trapped animal, stripped of its freedom and natural life, reacted the only way it knew how. Number 1. Maris Ellington and Neptune. The amphitheater felt alive. That day, the sun shone brightly over Blue Horizon Oceanic Park in San Diego. The star of the show was Neptune, a massive orca. 20 feet long and weighing 10,000 pounds, he was the park's biggest attraction. But beneath the surface of his performance, something was brewing. Neptune had begun acting out. Trainers noticed him slapping his tail against the tank walls. Sometimes, he simply refused to follow cues. Yet, management pushed forward, insisting shows continue. Neptune brought in revenue. Safety concerns were brushed aside. The warnings were there, but profit spoke louder. One of Neptune's handlers was Maris Ellington. She was 27, a marine biologist, raised along Oregon's rocky coast. From a young age, she had worshipped sea creatures. After university, she worked her way to become Neptune's primary trainer. She felt she understood him. Even when others doubted, she remained calm. She had faith in the bond she'd built with him. Still, a senior trainer had urged the park to retire Neptune or remove him from performances entirely. His growing isolation and erratic behavior were cause for alarm. Management refused. That decision set the stage for what would happen next. Later that day, the amphitheater filled again. 500 spectators gathered, eager to watch Neptune. Earlier, Maris had already done one performance without incident. Now she reassured colleagues, saying she believed Neptune felt in a good mood. The trainers ran through cues and safety checks. The announcer welcomed the crowd. The energy shifted as Neptune glided into view, his sleek form cutting through the water. He performed the opening acts flawlessly, and the audience erupted in applause. Then the finale began. Maris entered the water for a synchronized swim. Neptune circled near her. She signaled for a breach, expecting him to rise beside her. In that instant, he veered off course. Without warning, Neptune attacked. He clamped onto Maris's midsection and propelled her upward. She broke the surface, only to be yanked back beneath the water. Trainers on deck reacted quickly. They tossed buoys, ropes, and a bucket of fish to distract Neptune. Poles emerged, but intervention was almost impossible amid his violent thrashing. Neptune slammed Maris against the tank walls. Her body appeared at the surface, then disappeared again. The crowd sat frozen, witnessing what none could anticipate. The assault lasted over a minute before Neptune finally released her. Her lifeless body bobbed to the surface. Rescue divers dove in and lifted her to the deck. Medics worked frantically. It was too late. Maris suffered multiple fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe blunt force trauma. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Panic spread. Guests were evacuated swiftly. Emergency responders flooded the area. The amphitheater was sealed off within hours. The park suspended all orca shows immediately, a decision that would become permanent. Legal action followed. Maris's grieving parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit. After tense negotiations, Blue Horizon settled the case out of court. As part of that agreement, the park agreed to fund marine conservation and commission independent studies into captive orca welfare. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, but they matter. If you felt that too, show your support by liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.